Hello everybody, this is Chris with Overclockersclub. Today we've got something new from Fractal Design. This is the latest addition to the Define series of cases. This is the Define 7. And along with that, I'm going to be showing off the Celcius S36 all-in-one triple fan cooler. So let's get it out of the box. So the first step to getting it out of the box is getting the box open. Some nice heavy styrofoam end caps, plastic bag, accessory box. I like the pattern printed on the inside of the box. And there is the new Define 7 out of the box. Pull the plastic bag off and pull the protective front plastic off. Pulling the door open. Kind of gave away what I was going to show next, so I guess we'll just go straight to that. So the front of the case here, what I like about it, you have this nice smooth appearance, and I don't know how well the camera can pick up that it's like a brushed aluminum, very dark finish. But anyway, what I like about this, not many cases have a bay for your optical drive, not like they once had. Because not too long ago, you could get cases where almost the entire front panel was optical drive bays. And it's almost hard to find a case now that has an optical drive bay. So that's a nice feature to sort of have sort of tucked away at the top there. It blends in with the rest of the case, or the rest of the front venting section there, I should say. And something else I noticed, look at those hinges. Actual metal hinges. And they're detented so that when the door swings all the way open, the door stays open. And you get anywhere in the mid part here and they sort of swing the door closed. There's a little bit of spring force. And the door is held closed by magnets, although you can't see them. But I know they're there because I can take this little metal screwdriver and put it right there. So I know I got a magnet there. And there's one just below, right there. And same thing with right there, yeah, up at the top. Another one there. And even on the hinge side, there's a magnet there, one below, and I'm sure the bottom here is the same. Yep. So that's kind of cool that the door is held closed by magnets. And it appears that notch sort of hiding behind there is what looks like a hard drive activity light. We'll see that when we get the system all built up. Now something else to point out here is this sound deadening front panel. So any fan noise that comes through that front panel there is going to be quickly absorbed by that panel. Now the other thing is there are fans here behind that. What you want to do is put your thumb on this piece here and push while you're pulling with your fingers, and that releases your front filter panel right there. And it has a fine mesh filter there. And the reason I say be careful, same thing with the bottom filter panel here. This pulls out even when the door's closed. And I like the way this is good and smooth, because what happens, or what can happen, is while you are trying to pull this out, if it's really stiff, it'll start to pull a little bit, and then all of a sudden it releases. Panel shoots out, and you end up with a big dust cloud that you're trying to basically keep contained to your filter so you can clean it away from the case. And all you do is stir up dust that gets sucked right back in if it's running. And while we're still talking about the front door area here, it does have a couple of rubber bumpers right there, so when you close it, it has a nice quiet sound and not a jarring thump when it closes. And the two front fans there are 140 millimeter fans. They're both 1000 RPM fans, and if you look at the bottom, there is room there for a third fan, but we'll get into how the case is configured here a little later. And in case you are wondering, where does that fresh air get into the case when the front door is closed? Well, it's right here on a very generously vented section there on both sides of the case. There should be no problem with fresh air being drawn in through that because that's open from top to bottom on both sides. Now, another cool thing about this case is that it is available in several configurations. You can see this one is black with a white interior and a tempered glass side panel, and this one is the clear tinting, as they call it, which, if I can get the protective coating off, whoop, there we go. Static wants to pull it right back on. But anyway, this is more of a clear glass panel. Sometimes the tinting can be so dark you almost can't see what's going on inside the case. And to give you an idea of all the different configurations, there's black solid, black tempered glass with light tint, tempered glass with dark tint, black with white solid, which you would have solid side panels. There's black with white tempered glass clear tint, white with solid, white with tempered glass clear tint, gray solid, gray with tempered glass light tint, and then there's an XL case that comes in 3 different configurations there. You can see black solid, black with the tempered glass light tint, and dark tint. And another thing I like about this case, it's around 19 inches tall and about 9.5 inches wide, which is a little bit on the wide side compared to most cases, but what that translates to is more room here on this side of the case next to these vertical slots. And where that's important is if you try to do a vertical graphics card installation, which I will show a little later, this gives you more room between the graphics card and the side panel here to get air into your graphics card, which is important. And also we've got a little extra depth here for cable management behind the motherboard tray. That's one of my complaints on a lot of cases, that there's just so little space behind the motherboard tray for cable routing that when you go to put the side panel on, it's bulging out from all the cables, particularly if you don't have a fully modular power supply. So anyway, down here at the bottom, this is another feature that I really like. You've got this secondary mounting bracket here for your power supply. So your power supply can come in from the back of the case rather than having to sort of shuffle it in from the side like you do on most cases. So you can attach this bracket to your power supply, shove your power supply in that way. It also makes it easy to change a power supply if you need to. And looking at the top I/O panel here, we've got headphone and microphone jacks next to each other, reset button, a Type-C USB connector or USB port, power button, a couple of USB 2.0 and USB 3.0 ports. And if we look across the rest of the top, you see it is solid and smooth, and it has a very nice finish to it. Now, if you want to get more airflow, that's a little difficult with a solid piece, but Fractal Design has included a nice optional top that you can change out that we'll see here in just a little bit. And looking across the bottom of the case, of course, this is the removable filter panel. Of course, this is the front of the case and this is the rear of the case. But you have 4 nice feet with a little rubber insert there to keep from not only scratching up your floor, but to keep the case from sliding around, and it also helps to dampen any vibrations that you might encounter. And then it even has a nice little serial number tag there on the bottom. The next thing to do is take a look at the inside, and I have to remove this side glass panel. Now usually there are a couple of fasteners at the top and the bottom that you have to take out, or sometimes on glass panels there'll be a fastener that goes through the glass at each corner. And Fractal uses a completely different method here to attach the glass. You'll notice there are no fasteners visible from the front really or the back. So what they do here, they have this little button here that you push. I'll try to do this with one hand. And that releases the glass panel and it tilts out and towards you. And if we look at the top there, there's a little I can get it to focus. Yeah, a little ball and socket, actually a little latch that connects the top panel. And we just lift it out. Now this has the protective plastic on the inside too, so I'll need to remove that. Now looking at the inside of the case, first thing that stands out is the well-ventilated section above the power supply there to allow airflow into that section behind the shroud there for the power supply. And as far as motherboard compatibility, we go all the way from a mini ITX to a micro ATX, a standard ATX, and an eATX, which is an extended ATX. So you pretty much cover about every motherboard out there in the mainstream world. Now I like these grommets up at the top especially. Those are nice for fishing your power cables through to your CPU at the top of your motherboard. Also for fishing your connectors through for your fans if you put any fans in the top section there. We have a couple of nice large sections there for all your SATA cables going to the side of your motherboard. We also have a grommeted section here at the bottom for any cables that want to come up that way, and then we have an opening here also for cable access. Now on the right, those are the two large 140 millimeter front fans, and these two sections here are removable depending upon your needs for a radiator in the front, which I'll get those pulled out here in a little bit so we can see that. And then in the back again, there's a large 140 millimeter rear exhaust fan, and then the vertical slots here for a graphics card that you can mount vertically. And to do that, you'll need one of these. This is the Flex VRC25. This is a special cable that you would use to basically relocate your graphics card. Now these are sold separately. This does not come with the case. But basically this end here plugs into your PCIe slot just like a graphics card would. So that would plug into your motherboard. And then the other end here, this end here would sit right in here, and that's what your graphics card attaches to. And of course the mechanical mounts are over here when you take these two block out plates out for your graphics card, if you want to mount it there. And I'll show that too. And looking at the back of the case here, the rear panel comes off the same way the glass panel here does, and you just use this one-touch button to detach it, and this is really nice. Then it just tilts out. And the glass panel, I didn't point it out, but it uses these same tabs that fit into some little slots. So it makes it so nice. You just drop those tabs into the slots, rock this forward, and it latches. That is really nice. Just like that, you can pop that off. And the whole back panel here is covered with this sound deadening material. This thing's got some weight to it, but that'll help keep sound from traveling around the back of the case. Now looking back here, of course, it's white just like the inside is painted. But there's a shroud here that pops off that allows access to the hard drive cages here at the bottom. And this can be removed. I'll show that later. But you got these nice Velcro straps and these plastic guides for cable routing to keep that all clean. There's a multi-bracket here. This is used to mount hard drives or a pump for water cooling. We've got two little removable brackets here for 2.5-inch solid state drives. So those, whoops, I pulled that fastener out a little too far. There. Couple tabs that lock down into those slots. That actually is supposed to stay on there. I unscrewed it a little too hard there. Anyway, so that's what the back looks like. And the cables here, you've got your standard USB 3.0, all of your I/O connectors, your HD audio USB, and then your USB Type-C connector right there that goes into the motherboard. The fans at the front of the case are both 3-pin, and the fan at the rear of the case, here's the connector for it, that's also 3-pin. And then there's a 4-pin connector, and this is for the fan controller, and I'll talk about that in a little more detail also. But this is what would plug to your motherboard to supply control to the fan hub up here, and then to get power to that. I'm sorry, this is the control, this is the power. This connects to a SATA connector off of your main power supply. So if you're going to use the fan hub, you need to use these two connectors. There is the Fractal Nexus Plus 2 fan hub, and it is sort of a stretched out circuit board there that fits nicely into that upper channel, so that makes your cable routing that much cleaner. But it allows you to control 6 3-pin fans that you can see there on the left, and up to 3 4-pin PWM fans. And that is all tucked nicely up there at the top of the case. And now this entire front panel, I can show how that pops off. Now I've already popped all but one of the connectors loose here, so this whole thing comes off pretty easily. Something I should have pointed out earlier is that these hinges can be relocated to the opposite side, so your door can swing open either left or right if you like. But this comes off very easily for access to your fans. So if you need to remove your fans, this is how you would get to the screws that hold those on. You can see there's an additional third slot there for a fan. And this up here is where your optical drive would mount if you want to install one. And now it's time to see what's inside this box that is included with the case. These are your accessories. And the main one here is your optional vented top. And I'll show you how that is easily interchangeable. And underneath here are your hard drive trays, and then your box of actually your little hardware kit there with all of your screws and fasteners for the motherboard. So what you do here, if you want the vented section, is first you have to pop the top one out, and that's pretty easy to do. So if we look at this, this has the same little ball detents here, or little ball and socket type of attachment. And this just pops right off. You just push up and swing it around, and that comes right off very easy. Now the top panel here has the sound deadening material. So if you want to go into like full stealth mode, keep the case as quiet as you can, you would want to use the panel there with the sound deadening. If you want some airflow and you're not quite as concerned about the noise, you would use this panel, and it has the same cutouts there for everything. So installing that on top is really that easy. 4 clicks, one at each corner, and your vented panel is now on top, which you can easily see. So underneath this, there is also a filter panel right here, and this, you pull it back, it sort of locks into place. So you push it in and it locks, you pull it back, it unlocks, and this lifts out. You can see it's got the little catches right there. They're plastics, so you want to be a little careful you don't snap them off. But anyway, this is a mesh panel there for dust collection, so it's pretty easily removed for cleaning. And then the other thing at the top here, depending upon if you want to put fans or not, is this top bracket here. This is where your fans would go, or your radiator. This is an optional fill port for a custom cooling system. Another thing I want to point out that I really like, this entire bracket on the top is removable. There's a screw right here and a screw right there that I've already removed, and this thing just comes right out just like that. It's got a couple tabs here, actually 3 tabs, go into some little slots, and then you put the screws back in and you're done. This goes a long way towards freeing up space when you're doing your system build so that you can access your components. I've had other cases that have the top that's removable like that, and it is so nice during the system build. So let's say you still have an optical drive and you just can't part with it. Well, that's fine because the Define 7 has you covered. So I already took out the top fan that was in here. I just set it off to the side for now. And there's this bracket right here. There are 2 screws. I already took the screws out. So you slide this bracket out. It comes out like that. And you flip it over and you slide it back in like that. And then you put the screws back in to hold the bracket in place. Which is pretty easy to do. And then you take your front panel and you open it up and you pop out the cover here that goes in the optical drive bay. That pops out like that. And then when you put the front cover back on and open it up, now your optical drive bay can be filled up with your optical drive. And then you've got, you got some screws over here that secure the optical drive in there and keep it from flopping around. But that gives you an idea of how to install the optical drive. And the hard drive cage is held in with 4 screws right there. They're the first 2 and they're the second 2. And you can see they're in some slots. So you can actually slide that hard drive cage around a little bit, or you can actually move it toward the back of the case closer to the power supply. You can see how far those slots go. Or you can take the hard drive cage out altogether. With the screws out, again, you can slide that hard drive cage around. Or if you want to take it out, you take at least the bottom fan out so that you can get these 2 little plastic panels out. And this first panel is really in there for if you want to put a liquid cooled radiator in there, so you need some clearance for the radiator. And then the second panel here, when these both come out, this allows you to take the hard drive cage, there we go, completely out. And if you're wondering what's behind the door, this little door opens up, and these are all of the mounting locations for your hard drive trays. Now this entire section here moves to the front, and I'll show that here next. Most people, when they do a system build, will probably only use a couple of solid state drives, and if you leave the hard drive cage in there, you might use a couple more solid states or a couple more 3.5-inch drives for your system, and that involves moving this panel to the front. And what you do is there's a screw here, screw on top, and then there are 3 more screws across the front, so you have to pull the front fascia off, get the fans out of the way, and then this panel will move to the front. Now this S36, I already took the bag off of the radiator there. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over the features and functions of this because I'll be reviewing this in its own separate review. So be on the lookout for that. So for now I'm just going to get this installed so we can see what it looks like in the top and in the front. And the S36 comes with factory applied thermal paste. Look at that. Now the radiator is installed, and that is a 360 millimeter radiator in the front. The bottom of the radiator is as far down as it can go. And the only thing, the top screw holes here are off just a little bit. I couldn't get the screws in there easily. Not really a showstopper, but with a little work I might be able to figure out why it's not quite going down. Anyway, so the front radiator allows the pump to sort of sit in there like that. I always try to do sort of a test fit ahead of time to make sure everything will. Something I want to show off here is the ability to install a vertical graphics card, and you use this special cable here. This is the Flex VRC25 available from Fractal. You can find these on Amazon for around $45. Keep your eyes out, you might find a deal. But what you do is you take the block off plates or the knockouts here out first, and this base actually comes with, I should say the installation comes with a couple of standoffs, these little studs, and a couple of screws. So the first thing you do, and in this case it has the threaded holes so that you can install the standoffs. And I have this little wrench here to sort of snug those up. That's a 5mm wrench in case anyone is wondering. And then the next thing is to use the screws. Alright, so I got the second screw in. So this is now mounted to the case on top of the two standoffs. Now this little plate here that slides up and down, I'm actually going to remove that because I think I need a little more clearance to get the graphics card in there properly. Because there are a few things you have to sort of get lined up to make everything fit. And there we go. So that seats into the PCIe slot, and then put this plate back in. Actually, it has to come forward a little bit. There we go. So there. Now the graphics card is installed vertically. I can plug this into the PCIe slot that is on board. And that's it. You are ready to go. My original plan when reviewing the Define 7 was to show off the Celcius S36 in the case, and I was able to do that. And at the very last moment, I wasn't sure if this was going to arrive or not, but we have a nice power supply here. Also from Fractal Design, the Ion Plus 660p. So I'm going to go ahead and get that installed. I have the external bracket from the Define 7 here attached to the Fractal power supply. Now I'll be reviewing the power supply just like the S36 cooler in separate reviews, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. But this is a fully modular power supply, so you have the ability to use only the cables that you need, which keeps your cable routing to a minimum. And there's a nice little switch here for 0 RPM. Basically what that does is it turns the fan off, so you only use the fan when things get warm enough to require the fan. And if not, you can turn it off. That way your fan will run at least in an idle mode all the time. So now I can get this installed in the back of the case. Alright, so let me get into the cable goodie bag here for the power supply. So I'll need the main input cable to the power supply. This is a PCIe cable, so I'll need that for the graphics card. Here is a SATA power cable. We'll need that for the hard drive. This is the main 24-pin connector for the motherboard. And let's see, there should be, okay, here's one for the CPU. Supplies power to the CPU on the motherboard. And that's really it. Here's another SATA. Here's another graphics card or PCIe, and then Molex. So I don't need anything else. And it's also good, even on a modular power supply, I found out that it's really hard to get these plugged in when they're in the case. So I like to select the cables and get them plugged into the power supply first, and then just fish all the cables in through the back. Just makes life little bit easier. So I'll get these all connected and I can power it back up. And there's the power supply all installed. A little hard to tell, especially when I get the side cover on there, but you can always check out the rear of the case and you can tell what power supply you got. Which brings me back to these shrouds here that a lot of cases have. The full PSU shroud there, which really is nice as far as cable management. It makes your case build much cleaner, so I do like it from that perspective. But if you have a really nice power supply that you want to show off, you probably can't do that. So you gotta take the good with the bad. So now it is time to get the covers on, and let me tell you, they need to make this an Olympic event, because I've never seen a system that is so fast and easy to go on. You line up these tabs again with the slots, drop it in, 2 clicks, that panel is on and you are done. The back panel, which is always one that I struggle with, trying to get cables smashed into a small space, you drop the slots in, tabs in the slots, 2 clicks, you are done. The filter panel for the top, just line those up, drop it in, quick push. Top panel again, 4 clicks, 2 at the back, 2 at the front, and you are done. So I have the fans cranked up. Now these are the fans that come with the Celcius S36 that are in the front of the case here behind the panel. And I have my trusty decibel meter here. Of course, when there's nothing happening, it's no surprise that the decibels will be the lowest. So we really want to look at this when the fans are all running. The system build is just about finished. This is the Celcius S36. You can see this little sleeve ring. There's control here. You can shift between 2 modes. There's auto and PWM. One thing you don't notice are a lot of extra fan cables running around, and that's because they're actually integrated into one of these. It's hard to tell which one, but they're integrated into one of these sleeves on the coolant line. And it goes all the way up here to the top of the pump, and there's a circuit board right there, and it has all of the sockets there that you can plug your radiator fans into, so that goes a long way towards removing cable clutter. And looking at the back side of the case, this is probably one of the nicest cases I've had with regard to cable management. This little shroud here really goes a long way towards keeping the cable clutter sort of out of view. If you're using a fully modular power supply, cable clutter really isn't that big of a deal anyway. And for some general thermal testing, I try to keep the room around 66 degrees Fahrenheit this time of the year. My overclock is 4.2 gigahertz, and I'm hovering somewhere between 70 and 72 degrees Celsius. And that is all maintained with a single rear 140 millimeter case fan and the 3 120 millimeter fans that come with the Celcius S36. Of course, you can't see the fans, they're behind the radiator. But you have plenty of room for more fans. Hard to see with the reflection there, but you can put more fans in the top of the case. You can even put fans in the bottom of the case to really maximize your airflow. But the current setup, the way it is right now, I would be perfectly content with running it that way, knowing that I'm going to be able to keep everything reasonably cool. And now it's time to do a little thermal imaging. Just walk around with the thermal camera. Now I have the overclock cranked up 4.2 gigahertz on the 4770K CPU. So this just sort of shows you where the heat is concentrated. And the color differential there just shows you that there's a difference in temperature. It doesn't really tell you what the temperature is when I open the front panel here. You can definitely see where the intake air is being drawn in. I'll pull the panel out. Here you can see the radiator, and it is distinct which side the hot coolant is coming in on, which would be the top left. And then as you go down, you can see it gets cooler. The coolant makes a turn at the bottom and then comes back up. And then looking at the back of the case, now you get a lot of reflection here on the side glass, so that doesn't really tell you a lot. But of course, there's the rear exhaust fan, graphics card, and power supply. Now I want to show what the radiator looks like in the top of the case, but before I do that, I went ahead and took all the hard drive cages out and then relocated this panel to the back of the case, which is the, I guess I can call it the factory layout. And then I put this little cover back in and left the front cover out. So that is of course made for clearance for a front radiator. But that is the 360mm front radiator. Ton of space in there. And now I'll get it installed to the top. And now the radiator is installed in the top of the case. And it fits quite well. A little more light in there. And I put the case fans back in there too, in their original location. And I just realized I was in such a hurry to get that radiator in the top that I had the fans in the wrong orientation. They were pulling air from the top of the case outside and pushing it into the case. So I flipped the fans over. So now they are pulling air from inside the case and pushing it out the top. And with the radiator mounted in the top with the same 4.2 gigahertz overclock and the same Prime 95 stressing the CPU, I am getting roughly the same temperatures and the same behavior as when the radiator was mounted in the front, which is not a huge surprise. Now I did take the vent or the filter panel out of the top to remove some of the restriction. I can show you there. So that's just directly exhausting from the radiator right out the top. I'm not too worried about dust getting in when there's air blowing out, so I think I'm okay with it operating that way. And I want to go over some things I haven't really talked about yet in detail. One is the maximum height of an air CPU cooler. That's 185 millimeters. So you've got tons of room in there for almost any air CPU cooler you can find. I don't know too many that are over 185 millimeters in height. Fan positions. If you're going to put an optical drive up here, that limits a little bit of your fan positions, but you can get 140 millimeter fans. Of course, you've got one right there already, but you can put two 140 millimeter fans in the top. You can put two 140 millimeter fans middle and bottom. And then in the very bottom of the case, on the floor of the case, you can put two 140 millimeter fans. 120s, it's really the same arrangement, except you can get three 120 millimeter fans in front when you're still using an optical drive. And when you don't use an optical drive, it's really 3, 3, 2. So it's either three 140s, three 140s, or three 120s, three 120s, and then two of whatever size you want to use down here. So those are your options for fan coverage. As for liquid cooling, if you don't use the optical drive, if you leave that open up there at the top, pretty much the sky's the limit. You can go up to a 420 millimeter radiator in the top, which is really going end to end on the top there. In the front, as I already demonstrated, you can go up to 360 millimeters on that. You can do a 280, 240, 140, 120, which is pretty much the same in the top. Now, if you're going to put a radiator in the bottom, you do have that ability. You can go up to a 280 millimeter radiator in the floor of the case. You can also put a 240, a 140, and a 120. And of course, if you put any radiators in the bottom of the case, you'll have to take the hard drive cage out. Alright, so glancing through the manual, if you want to do a water reservoir build, you use this little multi-bracket here. One is included. You can use up to two more in the case. These are very versatile. You can mount the pump and reservoir for a custom water loop there if you'd like, and then it mounts to the floor of the case, so it would mount right there on top of that plate with the 4 little holes. That's where that bracket would go. And you can see that you can integrate a second radiator because of the fittings on this S36. If that's the one you use, you can actually mount a second radiator in there with your custom water loop. And then over here you can sort of see the hard drive configuration for that. And this is where you would use the back of that plate for another hard drive. And then your 2 solid state drives go there. So that would be one way to do a water reservoir build. Of course, there are many variations even on that. Now the next one is an optical drive build. So now your system is a little more restricted. Your optical drive goes up there. You can see you got a radiator, hard drives, and now your shorter reservoir and pump still mount to the multi-bracket, but now they go on the floor of the case. And then looking at a server build. And this is where things really get interesting, because you can use these little brackets here to actually mount hard drives in the top of the case. So you won't be putting any radiators up there if you do that, but if you're looking for the ultimate in hard drive storage space, that's what you would do. And then you can mount a couple of drives there on the floor of the case, actually on the power supply shroud below the graphics card. And over here you can see the whole tower of hard drives, along with 2 more hard drives in the hard drive cage, another hard drive on the floor of the case, and then your 2 solid state drives there. So you can really pack this case full of hard drives if you want to buy a few more brackets. And I talked about this at the beginning of the review, but these are all the different variations. So you've got solid panels, you've got the clear glass, you've got the smoked glass, and then you've got a solid white case with a solid panel with glass panel. You've got the black and white, which is what my review case is, with the clear tinted glass. And then there's also a gray version available. Pricing, since there are many different variations, the pricing ranges from about $159 US up to $209 for the Define XL, which is a slightly larger version of this case. It gives you even more hard drive space. But this particular case, the black with the white and the clear glass, is $169 US. And if you like this Define 7, but you think you might like the Define 7 XL a little more because of the space, this is a nice comparison showing you the difference. So you can see there the differences between the two. They are very similar. They share most of their specs. And here's a second page that shows you again the difference between the two. And the fans that are used in this case from the factory are the Dynamic X2 GP14. And those are the specs for the fans. Now I'll zoom in one last time on my computer screen here. The Define R6, which has been out for a while, I've never seen this case, so I can't really comment other than just comparing the specs. So to save you some trouble from scrolling back and forth between screens, all the information here comparing the 7 and the 6 is right here. So you can see what makes the 7 so special, and there's one more screen here that has the specs. You can compare those yourself. The Define 7 is not a bad looking case, but it doesn't really pop. It doesn't really jump out and grab your attention. It looks about the same as any other case this size and this shape. And there's nothing wrong with that, because the Define 7 is not out to win a beauty contest. What it delivers is a set of functions and features that are hard to find in any other case. You'd have to buy 2 or 3 cases to get the feature set that you get here. Now, some of the things that stand out to me are the optional top, the vented panel here that you can swap out here with the one that comes on the case, which is the sound deadening solid panel. So if you want to go full stealth mode, you can use that one. But if you're looking for airflow, you'll definitely want to use the vented top panel. The other thing that's nice is the USB Type-C port there. So if you have a device that uses that, you're covered. Opening the front door. There are several things here that I like. The sound deadening, the robust metal hinges that can be swapped to the opposite sides so that you can open the door left to right or right to left, the built-in magnets that help keep the door closed, the ability or the option to use an optical drive there, the way this front vented filter panel can be easily removed, the way that the bottom filter panel can be easily removed for cleaning and returned. Little rubber dampers there that make the door closing nice and quiet. Oh, here's the thing I really like. Their method of attaching the side and top panels. It's amazing. It's so nice. It's so precise. No more bulging back panels when you're trying to juggle the side and get it closed. And that leads me to the other thing I really like here, and that's the extra width that you get with this case. You get the width here, especially on the vertical graphics card mount. You have this extra space so your graphics card isn't mashed up against the glass. You have the extra cable routing space back here, which I really like. I really like the detachable power supply bracket there that lets you remove the power supply straight out the back of the case. That is a nice little feature. And the big thing, beside the removable panels really, is the ability to convert this over to a monster storage case. You can just pack this thing full of hard drives. And of course the ability to put a fan and a radiator pretty much anywhere in the case. Whenever possible, I try to show off or highlight multiple products from the same manufacturer. So that's why I tried to show off the Celcius S36 and the Ion Plus 660p in the Define 7. I know the case really could care less who's cooler or whose power supply is in it. But still, there are people who are brand loyal who really like to see that, so I try to do that whenever I can. Anyway, back to the Define 7 here. I think it's a great case. It really knocks the ball out of the park from a feature set that is really hard to beat. It's not as flashy as a lot of gaming cases are, but like I said, that's just fine. So I'm going to give this the Overclockers Club Editor's Choice Award. And look for reviews on the Celcius S36 and the Ion Plus 660p separately. I'll have those reviews up before long. This is Chris with Overclockers Club. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.